All right. Well, hello, welcome. Thanks for coming out. So this is the panel on Sushi Typhoon, and if you're here for a cooking lesson, this is not the right panel room. This is not a panel about food. This is a panel about a cinematic movement, genre, brand. It can be a whole lot of things. And how could it be so many things to so many people? That's a kind of a point of comparison. I would compare it best to the video nasties in the UK. That depending on who you ask, they have a different definition of what constitutes a video nasty. Some people say, oh, it's only the movies that you were prosecuted if you owned, and then some people say, oh, it's the movies that were confiscated, and some people say, well, it's anything that was on video and kind of gross and controversial. So you have these kind of layers like an onion of what a video nasty could be. And similarly, what exactly is Sushi Typhoon? It could be a different kind of thing depending on your definition. So the strictest possible definition is that there was an imprint under Nikatsu made for the foreign market in the early 2010s, and those movies were made under the Sushi Typhoon imprint. But later, certain other exploitation movies were retroactively marketed under the label Sushi Typhoon. So you could say, well, those are also Sushi Typhoon movies. Or you could just kind of say, oh, it's one of those Sushi Typhoon movies in a very kind of broad, colloquial sense of like, this is something that is cartoonish and gory and counterculture and really has a focus on bizarreness and just the most what the fuck can happen in Japanese cinema. And it really celebrates this, just the weirdness of Japan. And if you look at the name, Sushi Typhoon, the typhoon implies something chaotic, something very violent, but the sushi implies that it's something very stereotypically Japanese. And that's what this label is all about, is that it's taking things that you know from Japanese culture and kind of flipping them on their head and kind of making a statement of just how weird we can make this. Look at Japan, how strange it is, and that makes sense when you think about how many of these were not actually made for the Japanese market, they were made for foreign markets. Uh, so today we're just going to kind of talk about the history of these Japanese splatter films and how they came to kind of dominate the market in the early 2010s, and some of the major creative people behind the Sushi Typhoon brand. Talk about the various movies and kind of where it's at now, what happened to it, why we don't see as many anymore, or maybe we still do. So just as a warning, these movies are offensive. These movies are made to be counterculture. They will have some bloody images, although that will usually be very schlocky and very fake looking. And there will be weird sexualized imagery. So anybody who does not want to see that, feel free to help yourselves out. I won't blame you. And when I say that, I don't want anybody to get upset and complain when they hear about movies called Big Tits Zombie, Killer Pussy, Scissor Penis, or Zombie Ass. Yeah, that's available from Discotech. It's quite the experience. Yes. So basically, how we got to this point is in the late 1960s, early 1970s, television was taking off in Japan in a huge way. And that was really buying into the market that was previously occupied by movie theaters. So movie theaters were like, well, how do we compete with this? Well, television had standards and practices, and movie theaters didn't. So what they figured out at the movie theaters was like, well, we can think things much more graphically explicit. You can have a lot more violence, a lot more sexual content, and audiences will show up for that because they're not going to get that on TV. This just continues throughout the 70s. It's like an arms race as things get more and more extreme. And then it gets even more so when you get the home video market. And all of a sudden, you can rent whatever sort of weirdo stuff and view it in the comfort of your own home and not feel judged for going to a movie theater with people getting impaled on stakes or whatever. Uh, Unfortunately, this kind of backfired because there was a high-profile case in the late 1980s where there was a serial killer who had a huge collection of such violent horror movies. And what happened was the public in general kind of started to link the two and thought, yo, I would believe that. I don't know for certain about that one, but yeah, the Tsutomu Miyazaki case, right? Yeah. And that's also why otaku was such a bad word for a decade in Japan, was that people didn't want to be called an otaku because they didn't want to be associated with him.
That one weirdo.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It's a moral panic when there's something that people don't understand. It's very easy to point to. It's yeah, comic books, Dungeons and Dragons, heavy metal music. It happens over and over and over in society.
Stop on the screen.
So basically, what happens is in Japan, they really put a kibosh on a lot of this stuff, but then this stuff continues to be popular around the world when it's exported. So you have movies like Tetsuo the Iron Man and Ninja Scroll that come out and they don't really move the needle in Japan at all, but they do huge numbers on the American home video market to the point where if you buy a copy of Ninja Scroll on the Japanese release, it has on the back like huge hit in America. Meanwhile, a lot of the older things are getting exported around the world, and the studios in Hong Kong and in the US are starting to be like, hey, this stuff is cool, let's make our own versions of it. So you wind up with these remakes of violent Japanese properties being made outside of Japan in these live action remakes. So you have like Fist of the North Star, Rikio, Wicked City, Guyver, and Crying Freeman here. So then in the late 90s and early aughts, you get a return to Japanese horror in a way kind of fueled by the mammoth success of Hideo Nagata's The Ring. And you get a whole wave of movies that are coming out in Japanese cinemas all of a sudden that are kind of about spooky ghost things. And a lot of these are also popular overseas. They get American remakes and so on and so forth. But while you have this kind of normalization of horror, you have also an underground horror movement that's going on that's more cult, not as widely accepted with the Japanese audiences, but much, much more popular at film festivals, international shows, and kind of catching on home video markets, in the States, in Europe, et cetera, et cetera. You have, Tartan in the UK. They start their own label with Asia Extreme. You have Tokyo Shock is formed in the US. That's from Media Blasters, who is running this convention right here. And these are titles that are really kind of provocative in just how extreme, how over the top they can be in their depictions of violence and kind of weird, perverse subject matter. So these are where you get your Ichi the Killer, your Suicide Circle. Battle Royale was a huge kind of underground tape trading thing. It wasn't available in the States for a long time, but it was so popular among people who were bootlegging this stuff. And then you also have movies like Wild Zero and Versus, which were popularizing zombies in Asia long before they were popular in the States again. Uh, and particularly Versus, I think, is an interesting case because not only did it lead to this whole renaissance of Japanese zombie movies, which tend to be much less serious than American and Italian zombie movies had been before. Usually those would focus on horror, but the Japanese side, it was very kind of like slapstick and goofy because the director of Versus was really inspired by Evil Dead more than he was inspired by George Romero. Uh, and that's also worth noting that he was really into the foreign films. Like he went to Australia to learn how to become a movie maker because he didn't really care for the way that cinema was working in Japan. So of course he makes this movie that's an independent film in Japan and then takes off in huge success and popularity around the world. And all of a sudden everybody's kind of like looking to Japan of like, okay, you did something like this. What else can you do along these lines that will populate, really entertain the international market? So leading up to what we call Sushi Typhoon, there's a handful of movies that are very important in terms of setting up some of the creative power players that are going to be involved. So the first I would say is Anatomia Extinction, and this comes out in 1995. It's an independent art film basically. It's very highly inspired by Tetsuo the Iron Man, but this is by Yoshihiro Nishimura, and this is his first movie, and it doesn't really do very well. It's a great movie, but he doesn't really go on to do much else in terms of direction. But he does a lot more special effects makeup work off of the back of this movie. Um, Second movie I'd have to mention is Battlefield Baseball. This is from Yuta Yamaguchi, who had worked on Versus. It stars Tak Sakaguchi of Versus. As you might notice, the cover here is a parody of the cover of Versus. You know, he's holding a sword, he's holding a baseball bat, and he's fighting zombies on the baseball field, basically. Um, but Yamaguchi and Taguchi really kind of uh, Yamaguchi and Sakaguchi really hit it off, and they worked together on further projects, including Meatball Machine, which is a body horror movie about little aliens that come down and take over people's bodies and turn them into kind of super weapons. So, you know, your arm might turn into a cannon, and your other arm might turn into a chainsaw or something like that. Uh, and that's really getting into that kind of vein because it's Anatomia Extinction is more serious, but these later movies are much more goofy. And then I think everything kind of really comes to a head, no pun intended, with Skip On Boy or Delinquent in Drag. This is based on a Go Nagai manga, but this is kind of the movie from Noboru Uguchi that really breaks him into the public consciousness stateside. And this is a movie about a a boy who is dressed in a sailor uniform, fighting through his school that is full of crazy, deformed weirdos. But it stars this adult video actress, Asami, who really becomes like the face of a lot of the Sushi Typhoon films that go forward. So you'll notice with all of those previous movies, none of them were distributed by Media Blasters, and that's kind of weird because Media Blasters was like the distributor for Asian film, especially Asian cult film in the U.S. But they really were a power player, and at some point they basically are doing so well in sales, particularly on movies like Versus, that they think, well, we can produce our own movies. We can go over to Asia and we can make movies that we'll have the rights to in perpetuity, and then we don't have to license them. We can have direct input on their production, et cetera, et cetera. So uh, Nikatsu has this producer, Yoshinori Chiba, and he works with them on the first handful of Fever Dreams projects. And this is from 2006 to 2010. They make these 4 movies specifically for the American audience: Death Trance, Machine Girl, Tokyo Gore Police, and Death Kappa. And we'll come back to a couple of these later. Um, but yeah, this Yoshinori Chiba is an interesting dude. So he worked in advertising. He started out at Gaga Communication in the advertising department, but eventually he moved on to become a film producer. And his first movie was Zerum, the Keita Amemiya movie, which is absolutely fantastic. Alien versus a space bounty hunter, source material for the Iria anime. Uh, but anyway, he worked in advertising, and so he was a really good PR person, and he was really on the pulse of what was trending very well, and he was able to cut together trailers and demo reels that would sell well for film festivals and conventions and stuff. Um, so he has a whole long list of productions that he's worked on, and eventually founded his own uh, company, Media Suits. But yeah, he did really well with the Tokyo Shock collaboration of those 4 movies, and you know, from that he was able to persuade Nikatsu to start up their own label, Sushi Typhoon. Of course, nobody works entirely in a vacuum, so a couple of other people, we've mentioned all these guys before, but just to kind of go through who all of them are, Yoshihiro Nishimura, we mentioned before, is a special effects makeup dude. So he's really good at making mutants, people who change into weird things, and a lot of splattery blood effects. And he's kind of known as the Tom Savini of Japan. That's what you see him referred to as. But he's a big collaborator with Noboru Iguchi and Shion Sono. And yeah, he's made his first movie, Anatomia Extinction, and then Tokyo Gore Police was his kind of breakthrough in as a feature film commercial director. Now, before that, he'd worked a lot with Noboru Iguchi, and I use the term here, a weird guy, to describe Noboru Iguchi because when Hiroyuki Watanabe was at G-Fest, somebody asked him about what was it like working with this director, and he said, he is a weird guy, you should not watch his movies. So he was a porn director, and he wasn't like a normal porn director. He was into really like fetishy stuff. So he got really more into the grotesque elements of what he was doing as he went along. So it's a lot of kind of mutations, people changing into things, and getting into like toilet humor, things like that, as he was moving along in the porn movies that he was making, and eventually that transitioned over into just making purely splatter comedy films that didn't even have those porn elements in them anymore. So it's you need a strong stomach. I'll just say that much. Um, yeah, so it's interesting. Like if you look at the Sushi Typhoon movies, like you'll actually see a lot less nudity in them than you would necessarily expect from a lot of the uh, the material that he had worked on earlier. So then the third member of this triumvirate that we want to talk about is Tak Sakaguchi, who is mostly an actor, but he's also a stuntman and a fight choreographer. And he got his big breakout doing verses. He's known as a street fighter because of the story that Ryohei Kitamura told about how he got scouted for verses, that he was, trying to think about who he would cast in his movie, and he was walking down the street and he saw Tak fight two guys at the same time, and then came up to him and said, "You shouldn't fight in the street. You should fight in my movies." And Tak said, "You've saved my life, brother." And then they became partners from there on out. So those are the kind of the kind of wild characters that you have behind this, and you know that you're going to get something off the wall and counterculture and punk. So this is how Sushi Typhoon comes to be. So this is actually, as I said before, an imprint of Nikatsu. Nikatsu is the oldest film studio in Japan, but they have frequently fallen upon hard times. In the 1970s, they basically went from making normal movies to making almost entirely porn films. They filed for bankruptcy in the early 90s. So they kind of like have had some iffy periods throughout, despite being one of the oldest of the big five studios. Um, but they were amenable to this project because basically Chiba went to them and said, "Hey, for the budget of one normal movie, we could produce seven low-budget schlocky movies." And apparently that was a good enough pitch that they were able to do it, especially considering that this would put them on the international stage again. This would get them in the limelight with some of these films that would make it on the shelves at Best Buy in the U.S. as opposed to more traditional Japanese movies that tend to not have the best distribution here. Um, so Chiba is very kind of highfalutin in his initial statements. He said, "Oh, we have a diverse line of cinematic voices, and we're going to expose the world to the different artists who work in the Japanese film industry." And then the other people who are involved have kind of different statements. So Yoshihiro Nishimura says that it's nothing but Go Nagaiism. If you know about Go Nagai's manga, this is a 100% accurate statement. If you don't know about Go Nagai's manga, go read Devilman. Don't look up anything about it first. Just read it cover to cover. Um, yeah. Meanwhile, Iguchi said that they were made to piss off critics in Japan, and Sakaguchi called it anti-establishment. He said this is a challenge to all of the studios that don't give people a chance, and that they were going to do something that was off the wall and that they couldn't do in a commercial setting, etc., etc. So they really went off right away, and you can see these photos are actually taken in New York City. So you have Iguchi, Chiba, Nishimura, and then Asami is also in that picture in the top. And then the lower picture there is promoting one of the movies, Alien versus Ninja, at the Funimation booth. So they were really pushing really hard for the international market. And they had an agreement with Funimation at first, where Funimation was going to distribute these movies, and that very quickly fell apart. So I think they got maybe 1.5 movies out of Funimation before Funimation is just like, nah, we don't want to do this anymore, and all of a sudden other distributors had to step in. It's also interesting to note that when this brand was first announced, one of the directors that they listed as on staff was Takashi Miike, who is the guy for cult movies in Japan. Ichi the Killer, Audition, Happiness of the Katakuris, Zebra Man, etc., etc., etc. The guy is a machine. He can make 6 movies a year in his sleep, and with that, he was able to really sell the brand somewhat. But he didn't actually wind up making any movies for Sushi Typhoon, and that's interesting. And some people have speculated that might have been part of the reason why interest in the brand waned very quickly. Um, so, as we mentioned, they made 7 movies for the budget of one movie, and these 7 movies are these here: Alien vs. Ninja, Mutant Girl Squad, Coldfish, Deadball, Helldriver, Karate Robo Zaborger, and Yakuza Weapon. And not only did they make these for the budget of one movie, they made these in the timeline of one movie, so you'll notice that these all came out in relatively rapid succession to one another. So let's just go over some of these movies. Mutant Girl Squad was the second movie that was produced, but it was actually the first one that was released. And this one actually got a theatrical release in Japan first, as opposed to playing internationally first. And that's kind of an outlier for the whole Sushi Typhoon label. Um, Now, notedly, this was rated R15 plus, but they were trying for an R18 plus, and they just weren't able to get that adults only rating despite their best efforts. You'll find actually for as extreme as Sushi Typhoon bills themselves, there's actually only one R18 plus movie, and it's not the one that you are probably going to think it is. So this movie actually came about with Iguchi, Nishimura, and Sakaguchi meeting up at New York Asian Film Festival, and they got drunk and decided to make a movie together. And then they went to their writer Jun Tsukuda, who has frequently worked with Iguchi in the past, but is known for he wrote a big chunk of Ultraman Z and also wrote Jellyfish Eyes, which was produced by Yoshihiro Nishimura. So yes, there's a Nishimura-produced movie in the Criterion Collection, if you believe it or not. And they basically decided that they were going to split up their directorial duties. So Iguchi was directing the humans, Nishimura was directing the special effects, and Sakaguchi was directing the action scenes. And basically, what this movie is like an X-Men kind of spoof, where a girl is revealed, oh, she's actually from a family of mutants, or they're called Hiruko in the movie, and they have special powers, and they're a persecuted minority. The government comes in and kills her parents immediately. Then she gets brought into a terrorist cell, which is led by Tak Sakaguchi in drag, because it's that kind of movie. And she meets up with all of the other mutants in the terrorist cell, and they're like, we're going to kill all the normal humans. And she's like, wait a minute, I don't know if we want to do that. And it leads to some conflict. So it's a lot of Devilman and a lot of X-Men that's going on, but neither of those things are quite as outlandish as, having somebody with swords coming out of their boobs or a chainsaw coming out of their ass. This is, of course, nothing new for Iguchi's filmography. If you've seen The Machine Girl or Robo Geisha, he tends to like having, chainsaws coming out of butts. So what can you do? So this was filmed in February of 2010 and released in July, so it was a very quick turnaround. Notably, this was distributed by Toei Video, despite the fact that it was a Nikatsu production, and it was a rough shoot from what we're hearing about it. That because they filmed it in February, but they were all supposed to be wearing like summer school uniforms. One of the main actresses got really sick, and all of the fake blood that they were using froze on the set, and then they had to thaw it out. So this is one of the ones that Funimation announced that they were going to put out on home video, and then they decided to cancel it, and then Wellgo USA actually put it out the next year. So you'll find solicitations for a Funimation release that does not exist. So the next movie is actually the first one that was produced, and this is Alien versus Ninja. So this was actually, if you've seen like Dog Soldiers or Predator, I think that would be the closest thing to compare it to, in that it's a team of soldiers who's out in the woods and they encounter a monster and then they get picked off one by one. The soldiers in this case are ninjas. They're not historically accurate ninjas, but they are ninjas that run around in black leather because that's cool, and that's basically the way that this goes down. This is one that actually the budget was made public. It's only $600,000, which, if you know about film production, even in Japan, that's a very cheap production. But apparently, this was one that, because it was the first one to get released stateside, it made a bit of a splash, and people were talking about a U.S. remake for a while, which I don't know how you make an Alien versus Ninja movie in America. But yeah, Phoenix Pictures picked it up, and these are the people behind Black Swan, which is kind of arguably a remake of something Japanese to begin with, and Shutter Island. The next movie is Cold Fish. This is from Shion Sono, and I don't think he understood the assignment, because everybody else was making really schlocky, campy garbage, and he turns around and makes a good movie. So it was, I don't know what he was thinking, but yeah, apparently it worked out for him, although it's this sore thumb among the other films in the Sushi Typhoon label. So this is it's a true crime movie. It's kind of very loosely a true crime movie, in that it was based on a real life serial killer couple who owned a dog kennel in the 90s. And this movie is about a guy who owns a tropical fish shop, whose daughter steals from somebody who owns a bigger tropical fish shop, and that person starts blackmailing him. But it turns out that the blackmailer is also a serial killer who is so successful due to his various, killing people, dismembering them, and feeding them to tropical fish. So this is a movie that has won a whole lot of awards. In fact, look at this list of awards. It's kind of obscene. Especially with the best supporting actor from Den, who is a comedian, to turn into this really dramatic role. This kicked off Shion Sono, who at this point was known for like hair extensions and Suicide Club and stuff like that. He started doing other true crime movies, like Forest of Love, and has had a lot of success from there on out. So this is kind of like a feather in Chiba's cap, and he'll mention this movie completely separately from starting the Sushi Typhoon label. Next movie is Hell Driver. This is a Nishimura joint. You notice this is also rated R15 plus. The only one that's R18 plus was actually Cold Fish. So this actually has an international version, which is supposed to be for the export, but is not available in the U.S., which I think is interesting. That sometimes people will complain that, oh, this movie is too long, and they actually made a version for international audiences and then did not actually make it available here. The difference being in the international version, there are these enforcer characters. This one played by Asami is actually basically cut out of the international version. This is set in a world where there's aliens that come down and basically cause zombies to break out. They're not exactly called zombies. They look a little bit differently from zombies, but they're zombies. They just have weird things sticking out of their foreheads. This is basically they were trying to make, much like Night of the Living Dead was a social satire, they wanted to do something similar for the Japanese audience here, and the plot about how the zombies are separated off into their own little ghettos is meant to be social talk about discrimination, especially against foreigners, etc., etc. Now, to give an idea of just how cheaply made some of these movies were, during rehearsals, there was a car accident. A car got its windshield smashed in. So for the whole movie, they drive around without a windshield, and including a scene where somebody has to like bang on the windshield. They just go in and post, and they make like ka-thunk sounds as he's banging against nothing. So it's that kind of spirit that they had when they're going through making these films. Uh, Nice note about this is that when this was screened at Japan Society, they donated all of the proceedings to 311 relief because this was right when the Tohoku earthquake took place and was a dark time for Japan. And what a weird movie to have for an uplifting charity event. Next is Noboru Iguchi's film. It's Karate Robo Zaborger. And what you'll notice here is the remaining three Sushi Typhoon films are all related to previously established property. They're IP adaptations. So this is actually a kind of sequel, kind of remake of a tokusatsu series from P Productions from 1974. That series is actually created by Kazuo Koike, creator of Lone Wolf and Cub, but it's not quite as crazy as Lone Wolf and Cub. It's much more of a stock standard, superhero show for the kids. Um, but this was the big release for Sushi Typhoon in Japan because this was a known property. It was a $1 million production, which was much more than some of the others, and it opened on a lot of screens in Japan. And it was rated G, which is unthinkable stateside, but that's just the way that it went because this was meant for general audiences in Japan, even though you do have things like boob missiles and diarrhea robot. That's just kind of the way that Japanese children's entertainment is free to go. So this was a thing where Iguchi was actually approached to this because he was already a fan of Karate Robo Zaborger, the series in the 70s, and what he was originally come to was, why don't you make this show as though it had continued, and your hero from the 70s is now like a 60-some-year-old man who is still going around fighting bad guys and dealing with like hemorrhoids. So he was receptive to that, but he also said, well, let's make it like let's start out as a straight remake, and then we'll have a time skip in the middle, and then we'll do the later thing. And that actually worked out quite well in this movie's favor, especially because then you have this romance element that's not in the source show that he's able to incorporate it into it, whereas this doomed romance between the main hero and the main villain. Um, so this is, we just had the tokusatsu panel in here. This is the one that would appeal most to the traditional tokusatsu henshin hero kind of people, even though the main character does not actually turn into the superhero. His motorcycle turns into the main superhero. The next two movies are very similar to each other in terms of their production staff and cast in that they're both directed by Tak Sakaguchi and Yuta Yamaguchi and starring Tak Sakaguchi. So this is Yakuza Weapon. This is based on a manga by Ken Ishikawa, who created Getter Robo. And this is about Tak Sakaguchi is just the most invincible, most hardcore macho Yakuza character who then gets ambushed and done dirty, and he gets his arm and leg blown off in an ambush. And of course, he does the natural thing, and he replaces said arm with a Gatling gun and his leg with a rocket launcher. So then he goes around on his quest for vengeance. There's a lot of ridiculous things that follow, including his dead sister has been made into a weapon herself, which the main villain wields in a fight against him. Of course, she's naked when this happens, because why would she not be in a Ken Ishikawa joint? And it's much ridiculousness. The main thing that people tend to remember about this is that there's a 4 minute and 45-second one-cut action sequence. So I think this is right coming off of the Tony Jaa movie, The Protector, or Tom Yum-goon, where they had a 4 minute hallway sequence that's all done in one take. So they decided to one-up this, just doing 4 minutes and 45 seconds of Tak Sakaguchi fighting good dudes in a locker room, which was very ambitious considering that this was filmed in 12 days total. So in all of his interviews, he said that they were very, very, very tired at the end of this shoot, and that 4 minutes and 45 seconds was grueling. But I think it's also interesting that he went on after this to make the movie Crazy Samurai, which is a entire movie that's done in one take with a long action sequence. Then the last of these movies is Deadball, which is basically a sequel slash remake to Battlefield Baseball. So you have this guy who, as a child, was a baseball prodigy. He was so talented that his serve pierced the heavens and killed his whole family. And he was traumatized and swears he'll never play baseball again. And he becomes a juvenile delinquent, sent to jail, and then winds up playing for the jail's baseball team against the Nazi team. It's all very convoluted, but yeah, this is based on the manga by Gataro Man, or Manga Taro, which is a pun, of course. And this is a I think it's a fun enough movie if you haven't seen Battlefield Baseball, but it's retreading a whole lot of the same material if you already have. So this was kind of like a bit of a whimper for the line to run out on. So we've talked about these 7 movies, so now you should be good to get your Sushi Typhoon box set, and you'll know all of the. Wait a minute, that says 14 DVDs. Well, who are all these characters on the cover? Oh no, there's more, aren't there? Yeah, so there's a whole lot of other movies that were retroactively incorporated into the Sushi Typhoon line. And they were marketed not so much in Japan, but internationally as Sushi Typhoon flicks. And you can see this entire list here. And this actually goes back and includes those early Fever Dreams pictures that led up to Sushi Typhoon, along with a handful of other films. So I think we're going to have to blitz a little bit here because we only have got, what, 20 minutes left? So let's go quickly. Death Trance, the first, is very much influenced by Versus. Same lead as Versus. The director is the stunt coordinator for Versus. Has Kentaro Segal in it, who is he's Steven Seagal's son, as well as Takamasu Suga from Kamen Rider Ryuki, and a lot of Duran Gray music. And this was obviously a Tokyo Shock original. It had a manga tie-in, which Tokyo Shock also released here. Next Tokyo Shock original was The Machine Girl, which is a kind of revenge film about a girl who is abused, has her arm taken off, and of course grafts a Gatling gun onto it. So you'll notice some of these will thematically rhyme with one another. This was Iguchi's breakout movie in the States, and it had effects by Yoshihiro Nishimura. So this has actually had a lot of follow-ups, including just in 2019, The Rise of the Machine Girls was a sequel, but it had other sequels before that in various shorts. So during the making of Machine Girl, Nishimura was approached to make another Tokyo Shock original, and this was Tokyo Gore Police. This is they say that it's a remake of Anatomia Extinction. It's more of a sequel. It's something else that's set in the same world where people can just randomly turn into weird mutant monsters they call engineers. It's a very dystopian body horror splatter experience. But this is one of the ones that really put Nishimura on the map. Also starring Eihi Shina, who you know from Audition, but also from Hell Driver that we mentioned earlier, and Itsuji Itao from Zaborger. This was only shot in 2 weeks, which is impressive considering how off the wall it is. It has some very impressive stunt work. Samurai Princess. So this was, you'll notice this first debuted in New York, as a lot of these movies tend to do. This is directed by Kengo Kaji, who is the screenwriter of Tokyo Gore Police. So all of these movies are tangentially related to one another. And this is basically a film with different kind of samurai aesthetic, but with Karakura kind of fighting doll things. So a lot of like semi-ancient robot type of stuff. If you've seen like Ultimo, that would be a good comparison. Vampire Girl versus Frankenstein Girl. This movie is insane. Um, the plot is basically right what it says on the tin. It's two squirrel girls, one is whom is a vampire, one of whom is a Frankenstein. They are fighting over a boy, but there is a lot of other stuff that goes on in the background, a lot of other very offensive stuff when it goes into the kind of things that are going on at their school. They have, like the various school clubs, so they'll have like the wrist cutting club or the blackface club. Like, oh, I don't know about this, guys. So it's intentionally offensive, and that is the point of it. This is one that Funimation actually did release, and maybe it was part of the backing off of the larger Sushi Typhoon label. Um, this is directed by Yoshihiro Nishimura, but also co-directed by Naoyuki Tomomatsu, who is the creator of Stacy and also the Lust of the Dead franchise, which has a lot of movies about very horny zombies. Robogeisha is another one that is exactly what it says on the tin. You can see that they're very good at promoting things with very punchy titles. You'll notice a lot of these are English language titles for that reason also, that they're meant to sell abroad with concepts that are stereotypically Japanese to sell to the international market. Um, as you would expect, this is about a geisha who is a robot trained to be an assassin and has to go up against an evil organization. Also, there is a kaiju in this movie, which automatically gives it credit in my book. It's shaped like a pagoda. You can see on the side of the poster there. Another one I'm absolutely a huge fan of is Psycho-Gothic Lolita. This is uh, Gothic Lolita is a fashion style in Japan that's typified by like frilly dresses and umbrellas and kind of very uh, effeminate, petite outfits. So of course they decided to uh, cast Rina Akiyama in this and make it an action film. So you have a girl in a Gothic Lolita outfit going around fighting different martial arts characters throughout this adventure. She turns into a bit of a monster at the end, also. And it's an absolute hoot. So this is one I would definitely recommend if you have not seen it. Tomie Unlimited, based on the Junji Ito manga. There have been, I think, 11 Tomie movies, and this is arguably the best of them. It is directed by Iguchi, so it is not a serious horror movie, but if you've read much Junji Ito, you know that a lot of his stuff should not be considered serious horror as much as they are completely goofy and over the top. And this one pulls absolutely no punches in terms of what is the craziest stuff we can do with Tomie, who's basically a human flatworm who can be dismembered and grow into all sorts of different weird iterations. Yes. So this is a toy flick, and it is not available on physical media in the stateside. You can only view it on Asian Crush, which I think is really a shame because this movie is fantastic, and you'd think Junji Ito is so popular that somebody would pick this up, but so far no takers. Uh, Iguchi considers this a companion piece to Zaborger. I don't know if I totally follow his logic, but he's like, well, Zaborger's a film all about like men and brotherhood, and this is all about women and sisterhood, and like, you say so, man. I guess. All right, zombie ass. We mentioned it before, so we knew it was coming. This is another Iguchi joint, also produced by Nikatsu. So honestly, it should have maybe been a Sushi Typhoon thing. Maybe it just came a little bit too late in the cycle. Um, this is available from Media Blasters. It's just what you'd expect. It's zombies that are covered with poop that haunt an outhouse. This one was a little bit of a controversy in Japan because the lead actress was actually like a child celebrity, like she was on quiz shows and stuff, and then she appears topless in this movie, so it's automatically like, ooh, scandal whenever something like that happens because actors grow up or something. And then I think the last one we've got here on this rundown is Dead Sushi, which again you can guess what it's about. It's about sushi coming back to life in zombified form to attack people. Uh, this is another Iguchi joint. This is produced by a company called Office Walker, and as far as I can tell, this is the only movie that they ever produced. But basically, Iguchi says that This was around the time the Piranha 3D came out, and he was also inspired by Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, which is a movie about food that's attacking people. And this is very transparently goofy. It's a lot goofier than some of his other stuff. So the level of gore in this is actually toned down a little bit, but it's still very much within his spirit. So Sushi Typhoon wasn't really made for the Japanese audience. It was really made for the international audience, but they did eventually try to sell it in Japan. And they had this event called Sushi Typhoon Matsuri, where they were screening four of the movies, Alien vs. Ninja, Hell Driver, Yakuza Weapon, and Deadball. And they really went all out for it. You know, there was almost a month that they rented out a theater in Ginza and just were showing stuff. They had all sorts of events with people coming in, actors and directors, including a Q&A with Go Nagai showed up as a guest, which he didn't really have anything to do with these movies, but cool that he was kind of considered part of that spirit. Um, Norman England directed a documentary about this, which is on the Hell Driver disc, so you can kind of go and watch them selling Sushi Typhoon in Japan, including the catchphrase that the directors, when they're interviewed, will turn to the camera and say, "Watch Sushi Typhoon or die!" During the Matsuri, they also had a short film, Harapeko Yamagami-kun. This has not been available in the States or subtitled at any point, but it was made part of the Matsuri, so I figured it's an honorary Sushi Typhoon title, so we should mention it here. And this is really Iguchi and Nishimura getting together and having a giggle at children's shows. You know, things like Red Man or Kure Kure Takara. I think similar things would be like Sesame Street in the stateside, but of course they have lots of biological, scatological issues going on with these characters. Sushi Typhoon also had a games division much later than their movies. I think this was Nikatsu just kind of trying to get anything else they could out of this brand name. Uh, they only had two games, neither one of which was terribly well received. Tokyo Tattoo Girls, which is
Game. Like it's not really a game.
that's a fair assessment. Yes.
Okay. So you,
Yeah, and then Creeping Terror I have not played because it was available for 3DS. I say was available for 3DS because tried getting a new 3DS game now and it's not really feasible. So we talked about the stuff that was part of the line in some way, shape, or form, but that was just kind of a tip of the iceberg, and you can view this as a whole cinematic movement because there was so much stuff that was kind of riding that same wave, going through similar stuff. As exploitation tends to be, you make one movie that's super successful, and you'll get a whole lot of imitators. Look at how many killer fish movies came out after Jaws. So here's just kind of a big list of different stuff along those similar lines. I would recommend if you have a stomach for very long, awkward sex scenes, but can handle that in your romantic comedies, I would definitely check out Bite Me If You Love Me, which is uh, a romantic love triangle between a girl who is torn between a zombie and Jason. Uh, Hard Revenge Millie is a fantastic revenge film. It's actually two films that form a duology, very much off the back of Kill Bill, which was a huge hit at the time. Also, kind of kicking off some of this. Hard Revenge Millie is the lady with the gun chucks there. So and then we've got our the very well endowed bee woman is from Ancient Dogu Girl, which was an Iguchi TV series that he was doing along the same lines at the same time, a late night tokusatsu show. Since Sushi Typhoon, it basically has not been nearly as heavy on that sort of content, but every once in a while a film comes along that kind of captures a similar spirit. A lot of these do have, one of the various people involved. Um, Yakuza Apocalypse, which is a film about Yakuza vampires taking over a small town, was directed by Takashi Miike, produced by Chiba for Nikatsu. Seems like it should have been a Sushi Typhoon movie, but wasn't. That's the one with the karate frog there. It's a fantastic action film. has some of the same people from the raid doing martial arts in it, and somebody in a frog suit beating dudes up. So would recommend. Um, Similarly, the Stuffed Avenger or Nuigula Marzi, that's an Iguchi joint. That's a superhero film about a gothic Lolita character who can transform into this pink bear suit with the help of her magical girl friend, who's a stuffed teddy bear, who's rude and nasty because of course he is. Uh, But most recently, we have this new line, Yabai Japan, and that's kind of a perfect name, even though it's terrible if you're trying to Google the phrase Yabai Japan, because Yabai means a whole lot of things to a whole lot of people. Like to young people, it might mean like, oh, that's cool, and to old people, that mean, oh, that's terrible. It's one of those when you see something and you're taken aback by it, you say, oh, Yabai. So this is one of the things that Chiba's been producing for lately, and one of the movies that he produced for this new line, which is being distributed by Media Blasters, is Ninja vs. Shark, and that will be shown tomorrow night here at this very convention for its U.S. premiere. And you can buy the Blu-ray from the director Koichi Sakamoto in the uh, room just across the hall. So with all of that said, I think that wraps us up. Any thoughts, complaints, gripes, or grievances?
Where do I find this?
Uh, Amazon.com for the most part.
See,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
actually, I was messing around my phone,
Hmm.
like not out of like disrespect, because I was
Sure.
trying to find them and I couldn't.
Oh, okay.
I'm like, I was big 14, collection that was on there,
Oh,
not available.
yeah.
Like
That's
just gone.
yeah. That was a French release, so
Yeah.
that's why. Yeah, France and Australia are the ones that really like went overboard on
Okay.
marketing stuff that was not previously Sushi Typhoon as Sushi Typhoon, whereas like um, the U.S. they kind of distance themselves from it because I think a lot of that stuff actually came out in the U.S. before Sushi Typhoon was even available. Yeah. The one that you can't buy, as I said before, Tomiya Unlimited is so much fun. I love that movie.
Not just pretty much all of Junji Ito's works. Like
Hmm.
every time one gets translated and released, I pretty much just go to Barnes and Noble and pick it up.
Yeah, he's great, and so much of his stuff went unrecognized for a long period of time. Actually,
Actually, a lot of the releases now are the more oddball stuff.
hmm
Like all the mainstream stuff has been released now for the most part. So now we're really getting a lot of the off the beaten stuff. A lot of it's compilation bonds now. Some of them are really really good. Some of them you're like, oh, that's why we didn't get this.
actually, fun fact: Noboru Iguchi was going to make before he made Tomie Unlimited. He talked about making a Tomie versus Echo Echo Azarak, which I really wish had happened, but alas, that's one of those great. Maybe he wasn't even serious about it, but well, cool. Well, if you want to hear me talk about kaiju stuff, I will be around tomorrow at the kaiju panel late at night.